Hello, all my crafty people out there. It is time for our weekly project again. If you haven't been here before, my name is Stephanie and I upcycle clothing, generally items from my local thrift stores, and we either make new clothing or accessories. And this week I have a piece that can be controversial, but I know where I fall on it, and I think this will accommodate that issue. It sounds all cryptic, but what I have is this old quilt. Now, this quilt is, from what I can tell, in fairly good shape, but it is not a handmade quilt. It is simply a piece of fabric that has been quilted machine-wise, so it is not something heirloom, handmade, or anything to be significantly cherished. So we have this quilt. I'm not sure what size, and I don't know exactly what I paid for it. Probably about $5 or $6 at the American Thrift. It's a fair size quilt. It's probably at least a full, maybe a queen. And we're gonna make a coat. And this is New Look 6585, and it's gonna have a hood. It's gonna be a long coat. And this apparently is very popular to do the quilt coats with, this pattern. But New Look, I don't know if they're going out of business or what's going on, but they're very hard to find in the stores. And I had to actually order this online, and you can order it at simplicity.com. They contain apparently all the popular brands of patterns from Simplicity, McCall's, New Look, Vogue, you name it. So anyway, I got these for a really good price, $1. Anyway, if you like this kind of content, or if you want to see if I can do this, by all means, like, subscribe, comment, let me know what you think, and I will catch y'all at the table. Okay, everybody. First thing we need to address is our pattern. And I got these on sale for $1 on the simplicity.com website. And since I got them for $1, and I can get them for pretty inexpensive, like $3 or less, I am not going to concern myself with tracing this out and then cutting out the size I need. I'm just not. I'm going to cut the size I need from the pattern and be done with it. And again, the pattern we're using is this 6585. It's a New Look, and I went through quite a few posts and sites, and they cited this as a common pattern to use for these quilt jackets. So we're going to be making the middle one. I think this one would drag the ground on me, no matter how much I hemmed it. I've already got a short jacket, and I want a long jacket. And next week, here, it's going to be in the 40s as a high all week, so I'm super pumped. I'm going to have a new jacket. And the only pieces we need of this jacket, because we're going to do some special pockets, is the front, the back, or the back, and that's the front, and the back, and the two sleeves. And maybe this little piece right here that's going to go over the joint that will be between the hood and the rest of the jacket. We'll see. I have this coordinating fabric that I found on my shelf. Usually don't get that lucky, but it's almost a perfect match for the binding that's already on the quilt. And the other thing I want to say is, I think there's enough quilt there where we're going to be able to cut it out and keep the binding and not have to worry about hemming it. Sleeves, bottom, all the way up the front, whole 9 yards. I think I can do it from there without having to without having to hem it myself or put any binding on it myself. Okay, we have all our pattern pieces cut out. This is the longest piece. It is the front with the hood attached. You can see that hood there, this part. And what I did with my quilt is I folded it in half. This is the fold. And I have used some quilt clips to make sure that the binding is matching on this side. I'm just going to roll this fold over. Whoop, there we go. This is the bottom of the jacket here. And this is the front of the jacket. And the front of the jacket goes all the way up to the hood, like this. So what I'm doing is I'm placing this on the binding. And that way I will already have the front and the bottom hemline bound. Now, it is not a perfect match. There's a little curve to this bottom. I am not worried about that. The only concern I have is when I do the back side on the fold, I have to just make sure that it meets this seam line and I don't have any gaps or too much on one side or the other, so that will meet perfectly. If this comes off the edge a little, nothing's going to be hurt. Okay, we have all of our pieces cut out. This is the front with the hood. This is the back that was cut out on the fold, like there. And then we have the two sleeves. Now, I left the pattern on the sleeves for right now, just so I wouldn't have to do a lot of marking. In other words, I'll know for sure that number 4 is the back and number 3 is the front. They look very similar, so I didn't want to take the chance of messing those up, and I didn't feel like making the darts. So, first thing we got to do is we got to sew this hood together. So, we're going to turn it right sides together, of course, like that. And we're just going to go sew down the back of this hood from one end all the way to the front. So from the back to the front of the hood. That's our first stitch. And then after that, we will be putting the back of the arms on the back of the jacket. Okay, I sewed the hood together. So now it looks like a hood. And when I sewed it, I did use the seam allowance recommended, 5/8 inch. So I will use 5/8 inch throughout the rest of the project. And I opened the seam. You see that? And then on the outside or inside, however you want to stitch it, I stitched a 1/4 inch on either side of the seam. So that kind of gives it a nice finished look. In the instructions, it recommended that you fold it over to one side, but I didn't think that looked right. So this gave me a better look to me. So now we're going to sew the backs of the arms on to the back of the back of the jacket. So here's the back of the jacket. I'll put this down here so it doesn't go flying. And I did mark these 2 marks at the top of the neck. They match the marks on the back of the hood at the neck. And I just wanted to make sure they kind of help, line it up. But as long as you're using the consistent seam allowance, they should line up fine. And number 4 is our back of our arm. Not only does it say it, but there's 2 notches there. And that usually means it's the back. So I'm going to take this apart real quick, hopefully. I didn't put too many pins in it. Oh, and be sure you put the denim needle on for this project, because if you're using a quilt or anything close to this thickness, it needs to be a stout needle. Now I've already broken one, but we won't talk about that. All right, so that's our pattern piece over here to the side. Make sure it doesn't fall. And we're going to put our here right sides together. So this is the back of our jacket. So we need to put our right sides together and sew up these shoulder seams, armhole seams, whatever you want to call them. So we're going to stitch down each side here, 5/8 inch seam allowance, and put the back of our sleeves on the back of our jacket. Okay, we have our back put together. In other words, this is the back of the jacket and this is the back of the sleeves. Now we're going to put the front of the sleeves on before we attach it all to the front of the jacket. I have never put one together like this before, but I am following the instructions. The only thing that I have altered is the way that the seams are handled on the inside. And the reason I'm doing it differently is because of the bulk. So these seams, because they're a quilt, even though it's a thin quilt, are very thick. So what I've done is I have cut down the seams. See how I've stitched down the seam just like I did on the hood? Well, it gets really thick down here at the ends. And I think when I meet the other seams together, the rest of the piecing, it's going to be worse, obviously. So I'm going to do a part of the video. I'm going to show you how I'm cutting these seams down. I am not cutting the cotton fabric. I am cutting the batting out from in between at the seams, at the ends, and that's giving it a much easier time at the machine. The machine is not as angry with me. So this is the front of our sleeves. So what we're going to do is we're going to put them together like this, right down the sides, and we're going to sew them right down the sides or the top of the sleeve, 5/8 inch. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to open the seam from the inside, and I'm going to stitch down 1/4 inch on either side of the seam. I think it gives it a nice finished look, and it doesn't create that bulk that this quilt can do. Okay, I wanted to show y'all how I was going to do this adjustment to the seam to make it less bulky. Now this is a nice seam that's going down the center of my sleeve that I just sewed. And this, of course, was my shoulder seam that goes to the back. So this is the front and the back of the sleeves sewn together, and you can see how ghastly thick that is. You've got 4 pieces of cotton fabric and 2 pieces of batting, and in some parts of this quilt, this batting is actually doubled, like it was pieced together. So what I'm going to do before I open the seam, which is what I'm going to do next, I'm going to open the seam and I'm going to sew the 1/4 inch down each side of the seam line to tack it down like this. But before I do that, best thing to do is to open up the cotton pieces on either side of the batting, and then as close as you can to the actual seam, I'm just going to cut about at least 5/8 of an inch down. And see, I'm cutting it at an angle, but I'm cutting the way this bulk of the quilt batting. So then I'm going to go to the other side, and again I'm opening it up so my fabric is laying on either side, and this is just my batting left here. And I'm taking my little sharp gingers and I'm going down. Like I said, it's more than 5/8 of an inch. It's about an inch, but I'm getting rid of the bulk. So when I sew all of these pieces together, when I sew this to the front and the back, this will not be as bulky. Okay, here we are at the most challenging part. We are attaching the hood and the front of the jacket to the back of the jacket and the back of the arms, essentially. So the hooded part has this neckline, and then it also has the continuation of the armhole for the sleeve. I have pinned it. I started at the armhole on each side and pinned it towards the hood. Then I went back and I put the dots together, or darts together, what would be darts, and I made sure that they matched. And they did, which means at least my seam on my hood is a good 5/8 inch because it's the darts match. Now, what happens is, because you're going at an odd angle, you get a little squiffy here in the corner where your hood makes an angle, and the body makes the opposite angle. So I have this little excess piece. I am going to go and sew from each end and see what I have left over here. And then I will probably push a tiny little dart towards the sleeve away from the hood. And that little tiny dart behind the neckline will be covered by the hood. And I've already looked, it's not going to make a huge, or actually it's not going to make a difference at all in the way the jacket lays. So this is a possible creative moment that you have to take up. I've always had little trouble with this kind of seam, but sometimes when you're on the machine, it actually stretches out and works better than what you've got pinned. I don't know why. And some people would start in the middle here, and that's perfectly fine too. If you want to start at that middle seam of the hood and go out, that's fine too. The only problem is you may end up with a little excess here. And if you have a little excess here, that's pretty easy to clip as opposed to having to clip something up here. Now, this is the only seam that you would see like from the outside, because as your hood falls back, you're still going to see this seam. So it recommends that you cover it up, and it's got a little piece in the pattern. Let's see how big it is. It's about 11.5 inches long by 2 inches. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to use some of my bias tape I had left over to cover up that seam. And I probably will do that off camera, but essentially I'm going to do exactly the same way. You lay the bias tape down, fold it over, and stitch it down, because this is the only seam that you really need to cover. Then all that's left after we cover that seam, which I'll just show y'all how that turns out, is to sew up the sides. So this is the back, and it reaches the hoodie up here, and this is the back of the sleeve. But see, we need to make that one final stitch where we go from the sleeve hem all the way down to the coat hem. So this is very similar to our pilgrim style, peasant style shirts. And a lot of our other shirts where we go from one hem to the other and cut and take care of that seam between the front and the back. Okay, all the jacket seams are done, and it's time to put on our funky circle pockets. So I have tried it on, and I figured I'd probably want them about the same height I would like my jean pockets. And I pinned them down, tried them on again, put my hands through them, I think I've got them centered, and probably I might look twice, but I think I've got them pretty much in their same spot. I might have to shift this one over just a bit. But once I get them completely pinned down, we're going to go over to the machine and we're going to just turn over this bias tape that we had sewn from the other side, stitch it down, and that'll be the end of the process. Pockets were the last thing. Sorry, I forgot about those. So let's go sew those down. All right, everybody. I'm pretty psyched. I think it turned out pretty good. It was a little bit long. Not because it was a difficult pattern per se, but when you customize your pockets, you know. But it's hooded, so can wear the hood up. Now, the hood's kind of big on me, but I still like it. And my husband recommended that maybe I should put a button on it for like really cold weather. But I'm not sure. It didn't come with any buttons in the pattern. Well, any instructions for buttons. Of course, I can put buttons on it if I want to. But I kind of like the way it just kind of flaps and the pockets. I didn't have to roll the sleeves. The pattern itself was not complicated, and we saved a lot of steps by using a quilt that was already bound and being able to cut it in a way that we used that binding. So none of this had to be hemmed or bound or anything like that. And anyway, I think it turned out good. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I have a real fascination with coats for some crazy reason. So if you like this kind of content, like, subscribe, let me know what you think, and I will catch y'all on the flip side of our next project.